Morning guys. This morning I thought I would just record a little bit of a narration over this contour lines PowerPoint because I know that some of you are really struggling with it. So I'll turn it into a video so that you can follow it along if you need. So what we have with contour maps, they follow the same rules that all other maps follow. So they have bolts, they have the border, the orientation, the legend, the title, the scale and the source, but they also have squiggly lines all over it like you can see here. These lines serve a really important purpose. What we're trying to do with maps, we're trying to build a 3D picture in our head of what the land would look like if we're walking on it. So it's really easy to do if you draw in buildings and you have a key to show where there are trees and bushes and things like that. But something that's really hard to show on maps is what the land looks like. Whether it's steep, whether it's flat, whether there's little valleys, whether there's mountains. So that's what contour lines help you to work out. So what a contour line is, I'm going to show you this line here. That has a number on it that says 250. Every piece of land that line is over is exactly 250 meters above sea level. Every bit of land that this line is over is exactly 300 meters above sea level. So what we can start to work out is how quickly the land increases in steepness. So down here, the lines are really spread out. That means that in this land, because the lines are spread out, we're not increasing as quickly, so it's kind of flatter. Over here, where the lines are really close together, we're jumping up in height really, really quickly, which makes the land really steep. And that's the general gist of them. So what you'll see on every map is that the lines increase by the same amount of meters. And that's uniform on all contour maps. That always happens. On this map, we can see that every 5 lines are darker. What they've done, they've only written the value in every 5 lines because there are so many lines on the map. If they wrote the number in for each line, it'd get really messy and confusing. So this dark line is 200 meters above sea level. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, with the 5th being 250 meters above sea level. Each one of those lines is increasing by 10 meters. So what we can learn, every time we see a line, we're seeing an increase or a decrease in height by 10 meters. If there are lots of lines really close together, there's lots of increases in 10 meters really, really quickly, so we're going really, really steep. And when the lines are spread out, we don't have as quick increases in 10 meters, so it's much flatter. So you can see that this section here is far flatter because the lines are really spread out than this section over here, or this one over here, which is really steep because the lines are really, really close together. So this map kind of shows it in a more spread out way. The contour interval on this map, so the amount that all of the lines are increasing by, is 10 meters. This line has a 10 on it, this line has a 20, this has a 30, this has a 40. Each one of those lines is increasing by 10 meters above sea level. This little bit up here gives you an idea of how you can visualize what those lines are showing. What we can see down here is that the lines are really spread out and there aren't a lot of them. That means that over this way, there isn't a whole lot of high land. It's pretty flat and it's pretty low. Whereas over here, there are lots of lines that are building up into either a hill or a mountain. How this is useful is depending on what you're trying to do. If I'm walking in this area and I want to get from this point down here to this point over here, I can plan a walk that's going to be as flat and quick as possible. I can look at this map really, really quickly and see, well, walking straight across here is going to be the easiest walk to get to the other side, rather than coming for a walk all the way over here, which is going to be really, really steep. If I was a photographer and I wanted to get a really good view of everything that was around from this point, I can work out quite quickly that there are two high points on this map. One's here and one's here, because we had to go up all of these lines to get to there, and we had to go up these lines to get here. Now, I can choose which one I want to climb up depending on the sort of photo that I want to take. If I want to get up higher and see more stuff, I'm going to climb up this one because it's much higher up. This one goes up far more contour lines than this one over here, meaning this one's higher above sea level than this one over here. So I don't actually have to walk all the way to those hills and try and work out which one to climb up, or I don't have to by accident walk a really steep way. I can look at my map from further away and plan my trip and plan my hike so I can get to exactly where I want. This YouTube clip here, if you watch this, the bloke in this clip has a sandpit where he's got sort of this awesome digital setup happening. If he moves the sand around, the little computer projects a contour map down that also uses color. So if he changes the features by using the sand, the computer's automatically doing a contour map on top of it. So watch this video and see how the contour lines change depending on how he shapes the land. And that'll give you a little bit more of an idea of how you can see a 3D landscape from the projection from the contour maps. The main thing you need to know for now is that lots of lines really close together means really, really steep. Lines that are spread apart make it much flatter. At this point, I want you to stop the PowerPoint. I want you to download the contour worksheet. I want you to give that your best go. If you're struggling with some of the questions towards the end, rewatch the PowerPoint up to this point and get a feel for what those contour lines are showing. Remembering that the closer together they are, and the more of them that there are, the steeper and the higher the land. The less lines you have, and the more spread out they are, the flatter the land and the lower the land, because each line is showing height above sea level. Is that once you've looked at contour maps many, many times, you'll see that there are certain patterns that keep popping up. And you can look at those patterns and know exactly what you're going to see if you're on the ground, because they pop up so regularly that we learn what they are. This next chunk's going to run you through about 9 or 10 of the really common patterns. Not expecting you to be able to memorize them, but what I do want you to do is work out generally what they're going to look at from a contour. So remembering, the purpose of your contour lines is to give you an idea of the shape and the size and the slope of the land around you, because the idea of a map is to get a 3D image of what the land looks like from a 2D piece of paper. So, just like I said before, common patterns, once you start recognizing them, it gives you a lot of skills that you can use. So you can use those patterns to find water. If you remember what a valley looks like and low points look like, you can know where there are going to be really good features that can let you look out over a large distance, like a really scenic thing. It can help you find hills so that you can either avoid them or go to them depending on what you're doing. And it can actually help you to prevent getting in trouble, like running into a cliff and having to walk a very long way to get around it. So it helps you plan. So this one here, before I talk about what this feature is, I need to explain how these images work. It's nearly like there's an invisible line drawn across that line that I'm just showing you now. The top part is what that feature would look like in real life from a sketch. The bottom part is the contour map. These yellow bits are matching up. So that yellow bit there is that yellow bit on the actual picture. What a spur is. A spur is like a little finger of land that juts out from a higher form. So we might have a mountain or a big hill, and it's really, really steep to climb up that mountain or hill. A spur is kind of like someone got their fist and they squished a little bit of it down and flattened it out. Where this is useful, if I want to get to the top of this feature and I don't want to walk up a really, really steep part and I want to find the flattest part that I can, a spur is going to be that flattest part. See, what you can see here is that the lines are really spread apart, which means it takes longer for that increase in height above sea level. It's flatter. Whereas if I was to come up from this direction in here, the lines are closer together, making it much steeper. So a spur can help you find a really easy way to get to the top of a feature if you want to get up there to look out or to get to the other side of it. So a valley is a really important one. Now this looks really, really confusing, but we're going to take our time with it to make sense of it. A valley is a really low bit of land between heaps of really, really raised bits. It could be hills or they could be mountains. Now these can serve a couple of purposes. If you're looking for water, you're more likely to find a river in a valley because the water's eaten away through the mountainside and it's made a stream that flows through. If you're trying to walk and you see a valley on a map, if it's really, really rainy and mucky, you actually might want to avoid it. If you're not looking for water and you're just trying to find an easy way to walk, you might avoid a valley because it could be really, really boggy. But if you're in an area that's really dry and you're not worried about it being boggy or anything like that, a valley could be a good place to walk because it'll be a really flat chunk of land between really raised hills and mountains. So a valley can be important depending on what you want it for. So what you can see here, this yellow highlighted bit on the landform is this yellow highlighted bit on the map. We can see that there are lots of lines building up on either side of this really flat bit here. What we're seeing is a really flat chunk of land in here because we don't have any lines, and really steep bits of lands going up here because we've got lots of lines that come in together. At this point, we actually have 1, 2, 3 lines coming together and merging into one. That's nearly a cliff, it's that steep. That's showing that that land at that point is increasing by 1, 2, 3 contour lines. So whatever height that is happens right there. So what we can see down here is a hill on the other side because we've got our contour lines coming up quite steeply. So we can look at that feature on a map and know that this is a high point like a hill, this is a high point like a hill. It's pretty steep here, but this piece of flat land down there is likely to have a river, or it's likely to have water, or it's likely to be boggy, or in a dry place could be a flat place to walk. So a saddle, this name makes a lot of sense when you think about it because it does look like a saddle that you put on a horse. A saddle is a dip between big hills or big mountains. Now what that looks like on a contour map is our hills and our mountains over here, and we can tell that because we've got our lines increasing pretty closely together, meaning we're going up in height pretty closely together. We're climbing up a steep thing that's pretty high on both sides, but between them we don't have many lines here. That means it doesn't increase, it's pretty flat. So whatever that level is, it kind of stays there for all of that time. So a saddle can be important if you want to cross from here to the other side and you don't want to walk all the way up this big hill or all the way up this one, you can just walk straight across them there. So that's why it's important to start working out what saddles are. So this one is a plateau. Now a plateau is a piece of flat land. Now it's got to be a big piece of flat land on top of a really raised area. So plateaus can be a small feature that you can see and stand on to take photos, or they can be as big as Toowoomba. Toowoomba, the city, is built on top of a plateau. If you ever go there, you'll find that you're driving around and around and up and up and up and up, and then all of a sudden there's a really big city there. If you look at ancient British history, you'll see that a lot of the defences that were made, like the wooden barricades, were all built on plateaus because they could line the hill with stakes and people could defend their towns on top of the plateaus easily by shooting down with arrows or throwing spears or fighting from a high vantage point. So for a plateau, you'll see a really big increase in height. You'll see lots of lines really close together as if you were looking at a hill or a mountain. But then you'll see a really big circle where there aren't many lines to show that it is flat on top. So you'll have lots of lines really close together because you're climbing, you're climbing, you're climbing, you're climbing. Then all of a sudden, no lines because it's flat. So this will be the most common one that you'll see, which is a hill. You know from when you're walking that hills are really, really steep. So what we're doing when we're walking up a hill, we're jumping up in height above sea level pretty quickly. It's pretty steep. And that's what this feature is doing here. Sometimes you'll get a similar pattern for a mountain depending on your map, but there'll probably be more lines, or else you'll have a map where the contour interval is high, meaning that that jump in lines is actually quite a big distance above sea level, so it's quite steep. If you're lazy like me and you're out for a walk, you're going to want to avoid these. But if you're trying to get fit and you're wanting to walk up hills, you're going to want to go towards these. Now a ridge. A ridge is kind of like a series of mountains or really high hills that are kind of joined. So you've come up quite a steep way to get to the top, but once you're on the top, you can walk along and it's flatter than your trip up. So if you're trying to walk along a mountain and get a really scenic hike, walking on the top of ridges can be a really good way to do that. And a lot of your natural hiking trails that people build do that because it's really hard to get to the top, but once you're there, you can see a lot and it's really beautiful and you can walk along the top for a really long way. Cliffs. Now, you know what a cliff is? It's a really, really sudden drop, like straight down. You fall off one of these and you're not going to have a good time. If you like climbing them, you are going to have a good time if you took a lot of rope with you. So what a cliff is a really sudden drop or increase in height above sea level, right? If that's a sea level down here, that's a pretty big sudden drop. What you'll see on a contour map is something like this. So at this point, it is just a sheer drop, like it's not gradual at all. So what's actually happened, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 contour lines that have merged together on one spot. So at that very point, that sharp increase or decrease in height is the same size as whatever the contour interval is for these 4 lines. So that could be huge. On a decent map, they try and signal that for you. On this one, they've put little lines jutting out, which is to make you stop and think, why have they done that? Then you notice 4 lines coming together at once. That's a really, really sudden drop. So now, what I want you to do are a couple of things. If this is too much text for you, I want you to copy and paste those first 2 dot points, this stuff here, into a Word document so that you're not looking at all of it. There's essentially 2 activities here. One is those first 2 dot points, and one is the second 2 dot points. For this first one, I want you to find a picture of all of the common contour patterns that I've just showed you in this PowerPoint. So I want you to find that feature in the real world. So I want you to find me a picture of a cliff, a picture of a ridge, a round hill, a plateau, a saddle, a valley, a spur. Find me photos of all of those things, put them into a Word document, label them for me, and submit them into Learning Task 4. Then what I want you to do, as the second part of that, is make a rough contour map for each of those features. That's going to show me that you understand what those common contour patterns are, and you can draw those contour maps.